I wanted to say something about the interactive exercises that we did. And usually it started out with a gathering, and I would write a sentence that they needed to complete. For example, right now I'm feeling blank, and we'd go around the room and everybody would say the sentence, filling in how they felt, or whatever the sentence would be for that day. We also had adjective names, and I would tell the guys, it's got to be a positive adjective. I said, now, give you an example. I said, I could ask you to call me Kick-Ass Chloe, but that's not very positive, so we're going to go with Cordial Chloe. That's my adjective name, Cordial Chloe. Okay. And then, they picked up the adjectives that they wanted, either with their first name or their last name. Now, I have to share this with you, and before I share it, I must warn you, I don't use this language on an everyday basis, okay? I had to do it for special effects. I never allowed a guard in the room, and I always insisted that we sit in a circle because I didn't want it to be I, you. It's us. And in the first session, you can imagine, here's this bunch of inmates, murderers, rapists, drug dealers, you name it, they were all there. 20, 25 guys in a room, I'm the only woman. And I'd look around the room and I'd say, yeah, I know what you're thinking. And that look on their faces, I could see it. And I'd say, you want me to tell you what you're thinking? You're probably saying to yourself right now, what the fuck is she doing here? Little white lady, probably upper middle class. What could she possibly know about violence? Honey, been there, done it, stick around, I'll tell you more. And at that point, I had a meeting out of my hand for the next 3 days. Because, perceptions based on partial knowledge. You look at somebody like me and you say, what could she possibly know about violence? Well, like I said before, your mouth can be a lethal weapon. I told you what I said to my dad, threatening him if I should ever catch him hitting my mother again. I was going to kill him. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay. I've talked to you about role play. We also did Light and Livelies, and this is where the child came out. Because, oftentimes we forget the child within us, and that child does exist. It exists for me at this moment. And I'm the oldest one in this room, probably. I don't mind telling you, I'm 72 years old and loving every minute. Okay? And I, till I can, as long as I can keep going, I'm going to keep going, doing my thing. I don't have a problem with being this age, all right? So, but the playfulness, and it came out with these Light and Livelies just to break up the tension, because sometimes some of the exercises that we would do could really create a great deal of tension. So we had to, do something to counteract that. And we did silly things like big wind blows, and the person in the center would say big wind blows on everybody whose last name begins with a B or something like that, or everybody wearing tennis shoes or something goofy. And then, at one point in time somebody would yell earthquake and everybody would move and try to find a seat, because there was always one less seat than the people taking part in it. And they would laugh and have such a good time. They had forgotten how to be children. Okay, so we all need periods of time when we can do stuff like that. Like I said, the role play was always very, very intense, and it brought out so much in terms of their understanding how they could resolve an issue without being violent. And then we would have a closing exercise, strength bombardment, or, you know, something nice where gift giving, that one would turn to the other, I give you the gift of, you know, something intangible. So I've done these things, you know, both in the prison and the community. I want to share with you a couple of things, and I could talk to you about a lot of the inmates that I worked with, but I'm going to talk about really two. Marvin. Marvin is out now, and he's doing very well, and he was in prison for a long time. Marvin became one of my lead facilitators, and I used to tell the guys that I trained, I said, this is your baby. I'm here to direct traffic. You tell me what you want me to do. If you want me to help out with an exercise or say something, but it's better that the men hear it from you than from me once I had them trained. And they were excellent. And Marvin became one of my best facilitators. Well, we found out that, well, Marvin's brother had been killed on the streets, you know, drug dealers, that kind of thing. And the fellow who killed his brother was being brought to this prison. And of course word got out right away, and Marvin's homeboys came to him and said, we'll take care of him for you. And people don't realize just how much violence exists in the prisons and what goes on and how many people die. It doesn't get reported in the papers. Very, very seldom does. Okay? And they said, Marv, we'll take care of him for you. And he said, don't touch him. Now, he told me and other people later on, he said, if I hadn't been through this program, that guy would have been dead the next day. He said, but I was able to say, don't touch him. But it went a step further. One day, he met up with this guy in the prison yard, and they encountered one another. He went up to him and forgave him, okay? And I've learned that we forgive people not necessarily because they deserve to be forgiven, but because it frees us up, and we can stop being the victim. And that, to me, was such a celebration, to think that Marvin had come that far. The other person I want to talk about is Tommy. And when I first saw Tommy, and he showed up for a basic workshop, I didn't think he was going to last. But he came back, and he went on to the advanced, and then he came in for training for trainers. And Tom was a young guy, but he had been in prison since the age of 18. And I want to read a poem that he wrote. It's called The Boy Who Didn't Have to Die. I grieve for his father and mother, I grieve for his sister, and I grieve for the brother, for the senseless and heartless crime I have done. I know they still hurt and they still cry for the boy who didn't have to die. The pain and sorrow I saw in their face, the years can't hide or time erase. They still miss him and they still cry for the boy who didn't have to die. Many times I've wished and many times I've prayed that I could go back in time and change that day. Then there would be no reason for them to cry for the boy who didn't have to die. But they still suffer, and I must pay for the crime I committed that dreadful day. We will always remember and will always cry for the boy who didn't have to die. Tommy was let out of prison on good behavior at the age of 38. Fortunately, he had a good support system at home, went home to live with his mom, had a little job, and enjoyed a good 10 months of freedom, and then dropped dead in his mother's arms one night of a massive heart attack. I got the call 6 o'clock in the morning, and of all the people they had to call or whatever, they called me to let me know, because he was very close to me. And I was able to give the eulogy at his funeral. But I wanted to share that with you because I find it very touching.